Hey everyone, Kyle Mike here from MMLive.com, joined by Justin Rogers. Matthew Stafford, Justin has fallen to the bottom of the NFL in a lot of notable categories, including the very bottom in turnovers and interceptions. He's near the bottom in passer rating, all this stuff. He was of course benched in the third quarter against the Cardinals, and that has a lot of people this week talking about his future with the club. He's got 2 years left on his deal. I think it's about 17 million and then 22 million he'll make. He's a 22 million cap hit the next couple of years. Big numbers, obviously. Numbers you give to a franchise quarterback. People are asking now, is he a franchise quarterback? Is he someone the Lions can win with? Where do you fall on this issue?
Yeah, Caldwell tried to come out and say no quarterback controversy after benching Stafford, but maybe not in the short term, but he has created a long-term quarterback controversy, unintentional or not. Yep. My opinion is you roll with Matthew Stafford until you have a better option. It's not about getting rid of Matthew Stafford just for the sake of getting rid of Matthew Stafford. There is talent there. Is it good enough to get you a Super Bowl or playoff wins or whatever? Yeah, not on its own, but with the pieces around him. But until you have a rock-solid plan to replace him, you don't pull the trigger on trading him or cutting him or whatever dramatic doomsday scenario people are throwing out there.
I absolutely agree, and there's been a lot of media outlets, a lot of different people from local, national, whatever, suggesting the Lions move on from Stafford. My question to those kinds of stories or opinions is always, what then? Because right now you've got Dan Orlovsky. If you move on from Stafford, say in the offseason, then you're talking about either a quarterback off the scrap heap, and who knows what will be out there, but it's probably not going to be a guy of Stafford's caliber in terms of physical talent, or you draft a quarterback, in which case you're talking about another 2 or 3 or 4 year cycle where you're breaking in a new quarterback and all the stuff the Lions went through after they drafted Stafford. So I don't think there's any good answers to the quarterback problem if the Lions move on from Stafford. I do tend to believe that their best course with him is to surround him with better players. I know they've tried to do that in the past, but I do think Stafford has the ability to play good football. We've seen it in the past, but he can't do it when he's under this kind of duress. He needs more, I think, help around him, including on the offensive line. And otherwise, you're talking about a long-term rebuild, and I don't think anyone wants to see that with Calvin at 30 years old.
Yeah, I would say exclusively on the offensive line. I think he has more than enough weapons at this point, and the Lions investing more weapons after Golden Tate and Abdullah. I know Belk's not doing great, but
does remain to be seen.
I mean, there's a lot of weapons there, a lot of potential.
It remains to be seen in the backfield, but yeah.
No, they can't run the ball, and that's a big problem. The biggest problem. I don't know a lot about college football at this stage, and I'm not going to pretend I do. I have done some research on this draft class of quarterbacks, and it doesn't look too deep. I actually watched the Utah Cal game the other day just to get a look at Goff.
That kid's good.
He makes some great throws. He also turned it over 5 times in that game. It was interesting seeing that those two sides of the coin with him. But outside of him, I don't know if there is a franchise quarterback, an obvious franchise quarterback in this draft. So unless the Lions continue down this terrible road and are drafting first, or can trade Stafford in some situation where they can end up with the ability or the right to draft Goff, I just think it's out of the question. I just don't think you move Stafford this year, or even think about moving him unless you have a rock-solid replacement plan.
I don't think moving on from Stafford is out of the question. I wouldn't do it. And it is possible to do it, just would be pricey. It'd be about $11 million in dead money this year. There's about $5 million and some change the year after that with Stafford. Those are the last 2 years on his deal. So it'd be pricey, and I wouldn't like the move per se, because I don't think the alternatives are that attractive. You're talking about a long-term deal at that point, and I don't think the Lions have that kind of time with the personnel they have. I do think there will be changes to the offense, and I think it'll come in the pieces around him, namely the leadership, the Joe Lombardi. Barring something miraculous, I think that there will be some kind of fundamental change with that position, with the scheme, because it's clearly not working to this point, and it's to Stafford's detriment. He has not been a good quarterback in 22 games in this scheme from start to now, and I just think that moving Stafford is not the best move.
What I think is it's time to move on from Dan Orlovsky, and that sounds really simple and cliche to say, like it's a 32-year-old backup quarterback without a lot of success in this in this league, but regardless of who's coaching or GMing, whatever the changes are at the top of the chain next year, Lions need to draft a quarterback they like at some point in the draft, probably in the first 2 days, that can be a young, talented guy they develop behind Stafford. Will give them a year to really assess him on the practice field, on how that kid is developing, and then at the end of next season, is that the guy? Is that backup capable of taking and moving Stafford and picking up? You're going to pick up something nice for Matthew Stafford in the trade market. People can act like they're frustrated all they want, but Jay Cutler brought back 2 first-round picks, and I would say that's very comparable talent. I think Cutler and Stafford are very similar outside of maybe some of the attitude issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's good quarterbacks are hard to come by in this league. And
Yeah.
I had a fan the other day who I ran into in Chipotle of all places, and was frustrated by was frustrated by the backup quarterback situation. And I'm like, well, the Lions have a quarterback issue for sure, but there's not a lot of teams that have good backup quarterbacks. There's just not a lot of good starting quarterbacks out there. And so a guy of Stafford's ability, my point is, a guy of Stafford's ability is going to fetch something on the trade market, because physically there's just not a lot of guys like that. You can maybe draft one, again, but then you're talking about 2, 3, 4 years before he's, used to the NFL and all that kind of stuff. I think you could for sure get value out of a guy like that. To your point about drafting a quarterback, I know that's something the Lions have explored previously, and I think they were pretty close to one in 2013 and in 2014 in Caldwell's first draft here, but they ended up going in a different direction. The right guy fell to them, and it just didn't happen. But yeah, it's something they've been open to previously. Caldwell evaluates every single quarterback in every single draft. I think that's something they'll definitely explore going forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are teams that have been looking for quarterbacks for years. Teams like Cleveland, teams like Houston. It seems like Buffalo's kind of got their situation finally under control. Washington probably could use a upgrade at quarterback. There are teams in the market that will pay a premium to get a guy like Stafford, and a coaching staff that believes still in him. This staff, arguably still believes in him too. So
they say, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you ride it out until you have an alternative.
I mean, yeah, you have to. You have no choice. He's your quarterback, and you're not going to disparage him while he's in uniform. And
right.
We'll see what happens, though. There's for sure, I think, some uncertainty going into next year, and the Lions have some big picture questions to ask themselves about the quarterback position, even if they do go forward with Stafford in the offense. For Dustin Rogers, I'm Kyle Meinke. We are MLive. Keep it here.